This video corresponds to the presentation section of my dissertation defense in the History of Art and Architecture department at the University of Pittsburgh that took place on July 27, 2020. Letícia Parente, Embodying New Media Art Strategies in 1970s Brazil. Thank you all for being here today, for watching this video, and thank you very much to my dissertation committee, Jennifer Justin, Barbara McCloskey, Terry Smith, and Elena Stromberg, for being here since day one. I want to start by watching with you a passage of Letícia Parente's video, Marca Registrada, in which she stitches the words "Made in Brazil" on the sole of her foot. Created in 1975 in Rio de Janeiro, this video reveals the highly restricted political participation and increased industrialization experienced between 1964 and 1985 during Brazil's 21-year military dictatorship. The sewing tools chosen by Parente and the delicacy of her stitching denounced torture techniques used by the state and the general oppression that was particularly strong for female bodies living in a patriarchal society. Today, Marca Registrada is included in university curricula in Brazil and is recognized by art students as a local example of contemporary art. I first encountered Parente sewing the word Brazil in an art history course while completing my BA in literature at Universidad de los Andes in Bogotá. Years later, after writing an MA thesis on experimental films at Stony Brook University, the black and white images of Parente's Marca Registrada offered me with an entry point into the complex history of modern and contemporary art of the Americas, a region that has provided me with several homes. My interest for the artistic practice of Parente, a tenured chemistry professor whose career roughly coincided with Brazil's military dictatorship, may have come from the configuration of my own family, composed of both chemists and artists. Whereas my maternal grandfather, Enrique Gaviria, worked all his life as chemistry professor at Universidad Nacional de Colombia, my father, Enrique Pardo, was a practicing artist and an architect, also in Colombia, a country with a profound violent history. Seeking to understand how these professions converged in the practices of a single person in South America, since I arrived here at HAA, History of Art and Architecture Department at Pitt, I closely followed Parente's steps. During my first trip to Brazil in 2015, and without previous experience in Lusophone America, I found fertile ground in archives and museum collections, and a warm welcoming among Parente's family and colleagues. For the next 4 years, I spent most of my summers in Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Fortaleza, interviewing Parente's children, her artist colleagues and collaborators, and one of the chemist students and mentees. Our conversations were usually conducted where interactions with Parente had taken place. And here we see Parente with a group of artists with whom she worked in Rio de Janeiro, most of whom I interviewed. These stills are from wireless telephone, Telefonism View, their only collaborative work, and Parente is on the second row with a dark t-shirt. Next to her with sunglasses is artist Sonia Andrade. This dissertation tells the story of Parente's intellectual journey, tracing her transition from the chemistry laboratories and classrooms of the Universidade Federal do Ceará in Fortaleza in the 1960s to the experimental curatorial program of the Museu de Arte Moderna in Rio de Janeiro and the Museu de Arte Contemporânea in São Paulo in the 1970s, to the cosmopolitan art galleries of the 1981 São Paulo Biennial. In doing so, my dissertation, the first substantial study on Parente's work in any language, asks how and why a scientist with an established career turned to art making in a time of reduced freedom of expression. In order to answer these questions, I approach Parente as a node within a larger network of artists, critics, and curators that conducted informal group meetings, but who also worked in art institutions and local newspapers. To examine the structural social conditions that allowed Parente to emerge as an artist at the age of 45, when she produced Marca Registrada, and to establish herself as a recognized artist at a time of social and political oppression, I delve into Parente's private archive, including her yearly planners, her manuscripts, and her personal notebooks that we're seeing on the left, as preserved by her family in Rio and Fortaleza. And just a quick note, the note that we see on the right is one of the 3 published volumes that Parente wrote on the subject of inorganic chemistry. Other private and public repositories that I researched include primarily the Museo de Arte Moderna, the Museo de Arte Contemporânea, both in São Paulo and in Rio de Janeiro, the Brazilian Society for the Progress of Science in São Paulo, and the São Paulo Biennial. This variety of sources allowed me to weave together institutional records with oral histories. This, in combination with the documentation of multiple and apparently unrelated subjects that her personal archive contains, evidences how the specifics of her political and artistic context provoked Parente to position her work at the intersection of advocacy for women's rights, scientific paradigms, and new technologies. In addition to original archival sources, curatorial methodologies played an important role in my research. Before the inclusion of Parente's work in the 2017 Getty Initiative Pacific Standard Time LALA, her work was only shown once in a gallery space in the US as my curatorial recreation of her installation Medida, Measurement, originally produced in 1976. For this curatorial recreation of Parente's installation, which I presented at the University of Pittsburgh in 2016, I researched all the components of this work, from the source images of the infographics that we see on the walls to its accompanying sound, and reproduced them applying the same techniques that Parente used. In addition to serving as an intense research tool, this curatorial process offered an unparalleled opportunity to introduce visitors to the complexities of Parente's work, while serving as a point of departure for interrogating the art historical significance of today's international curatorial enterprises. My dissertation argues that the artistic strategies and cultural networks created to bypass dictatorial restrictions, and of which Parente became an active participant, effectively facilitated the emergence of a new era of openness and criticality in the history of art from Brazil. Through 5 chapters, chronologically organized, I examined the typologies of conceptual art strategies that Parente developed, sometimes in scientific laboratories and with newly available technologies, to intrinsically include her body in the media of video, Xerox, installation, and mail art. She did so as an affective way to express her multi-layered concerns about the social and political life in Brazil. To examine her use of video, through which she emerged as an artist in the wake of Brazil's most repressive dictatorial period, Anos de Chumbo, Leaden Years, the first chapter analyzes 3 works that Parente created in 1975, Marca Registrada, Preparação 1, and N. 3 instances in which she manipulates and tortures her own body. To examine her work on Xerox, Chapter 2 delves into her series Casa and Mulheres, while Chapter 3 analyzes the intersection between science and art, most evidently present in her participatory installation Medida. Chapter 4 lends itself as a transition between the early and late years of Parente's artistic journey. Focusing on the videos Preparação 2 and Tarefa, this chapter analyzes how Parente embodied the anti-colonialist ideas of the Brazilian modernist movement, Anthropophagia, by manipulating her body to emulate the authoritarian methods employed by the government, and to display historical social relations during the dictatorial period of distensão, relaxation. The fifth and last chapter examines at its core the political stakes of her male artwork, Garimbo, stamp, a video recording produced during Brazil's period of abertura, opening, in which Parente intended to send herself, that is her own living body, through the regular mail system as her contribution to the 16th São Paulo biennial. The progression of these 5 chapters demonstrates how, in the wake of Brazil's leading years, the most repressive period of the dictatorship, Parente entered the art world of Rio de Janeiro via her use of video, experimented with Xerox and collage as a way to express and participate in feminist global tendencies spearheaded by the 1975 United Nations declared International Women's Year, achieved national recognition with her most complex work, Medida, and positioned herself within international currents of contemporary art through her participation in the São Paulo biennial during the periods of relaxation and opening that anticipated Brazil's return to democracy. From experimenting in scientific laboratories in Fortaleza to exhibiting in cosmopolitan art galleries in São Paulo, Parente's artistic career thoroughly traversed the historical development of contemporary art in Brazil. An analysis of Parente's practice offers insights into the networks of artists, critics, and curators who composed Brazil's 1970s art world and contributes to a historiography of exhibitions and criticism in Brazil. Thank you for watching.